A diamond does not become a diamond when it is cleaned. It was a diamond even when it was covered in mud. The mud only hid the glory, but it did not change the nature. There are millions of people living like rocks today because they are covered in the mud of other people's opinions. They have forgotten that they were born to shine, born to rule, and born to lead. Think about that diamond for a moment. Think about it sitting in the dark earth for 1,000 years. Rain falls on it, dirt covers it, other rocks pile on top of it, and yet not a single moment of darkness, not a single layer of mud, not a single heavy stone sitting on top of it could change what it was. It was a diamond. It was always a diamond. The pressure did not make it something else. The darkness did not remove its value. The mud did not take away its glory. The mud only hid it. There is a great difference between hiding something and destroying it. You can hide a treasure, but the treasure is still a treasure. You can cover a crown, but the crown is still a crown. Now hear this. That diamond is you. That diamond is the person listening right now. You were born with a nature, with a design, with a purpose so powerful that no amount of failure, no amount of criticism, no amount of disappointment can change what you truly are. The mud of your past cannot change your nature. The mud of poverty cannot change your nature. The mud of rejection cannot change your nature. The mud of other people telling you that you are nothing, that you will never amount to anything, that you are too young or too old or too uneducated or too broken. None of that mud can change what was placed inside you before you were even born. But here is the painful truth. Most people never get cleaned. Most people go through their entire lives covered in mud, and they accept the mud as their identity. They stop saying, I am a diamond covered in mud. They start saying, I am just a dirty rock. And once a person accepts the mud as who they are, they stop fighting. They stop reaching. They stop believing. They settle. And settling is the greatest tragedy a human being can experience. Because settling is not peace. Settling is giving up while pretending to be at rest. So the question today is not whether you are a diamond. The question is already answered. You are. The question is whether you are going to let the rain of truth wash the mud away. The question is whether you are going to sit still long enough for the light to hit your surface. Because when truth reaches a prepared heart and when light touches the surface of a prepared life, everything changes. Not because the diamond became something new, but because the diamond finally remembered what it always was. Leadership is a discovery. Leadership is a discovery. And that is what this message is about. Not about becoming something you are not. Not about learning a new technique or copying someone else's style. This message is about remembering, about going back to the original design, about wiping the mud away and seeing, perhaps for the first time in your life, the brilliance that was always there. Now, before going further, something must be understood that most people get completely wrong. And this wrong understanding has kept millions of gifted people trapped in ordinary, small, shrinking lives. The wrong understanding is this. Leadership is a position. Leadership is a title. Leadership is something given to you by other people. And as long as a person believes that, they will spend their whole life waiting for someone to choose them, waiting for a promotion, waiting for permission, waiting for a vote, waiting for someone else to recognize what they should have recognized in themselves long ago. Leadership is not a position. Leadership is a spirit. Say that again. Leadership is a spirit. It is a mindset. It is a way of seeing the world and your place in it. It is an internal decision that says, regardless of my title, regardless of my salary, regardless of whether anyone else has recognized me, I know what I carry. I know what I was built for. And I will function in that capacity right now, right here, in this space, with these people, in this season, A king who does not know he is a king will live like a servant. Read that again slowly. A king who does not know he is a king will live like a servant. And the most heartbreaking thing about that picture is that nobody forced him into servanthood. Nobody locked a chain around his ankle. He simply did not know. And ignorance is the most effective prison ever built because it requires no walls, no guards, no locks. The prisoner stays inside simply because he does not know the door is open. Right now, all over the world, there are kings working as servants. There are queens operating as maids. There are generals taking orders from people with half their wisdom and a tenth of their courage, simply because those people have a title and those generals do not. This is the great crisis of this age. Not a crisis of talent, not a crisis of intelligence, not a crisis of resources. It is a crisis of identity. People do not know who they are. And when you do not know who you are, you will accept anything other people tell you that you are. So leadership begins not in a boardroom, not in an election, not in a classroom. Leadership begins in the mind. It begins the moment a person decides, I am not going to define myself by what I have been told I am. I am going to define myself by what I was designed to be. That is the beginning of leadership. That is the moment the diamond remembers it is a diamond. Now let us go deeper. Let us talk about the first great enemy of your leadership nature. And the name of that enemy is the crowd, the tragedy of the follower. There is something that happens to human beings when they gather in large groups, something that is both beautiful and dangerous. In large groups, people feel safe, and safety is not a bad thing. But there is a specific kind of safety that is deadly to the human spirit. It is the safety of invisibility, the safety of disappearing into the mass, the safety of never being wrong because you are always agreeing with whoever is loudest. This is the safety that kills kings. This is the safety that keeps diamonds buried in mud. The crowd is comfortable. The crowd has answers for everything. The crowd will tell you what to wear, what to think, what to believe, who to follow, where to go, and how fast to get there. And if you follow the crowd long enough, you will arrive at the crowd's destination, which is almost always mediocrity. Average, the middle of the bell curve, the place where most people end up because most people who had no idea where they were going. Following the crowd is a slow death. Following the crowd is a slow death. Not a dramatic death, not the kind of death that people mourn at funerals. It is the quiet death of a dream, the gradual silencing of a vision, the slow dimming of a light that was once brilliant and is now barely a flicker. And the cruelest part is that the person often does not even notice it happening. They are so busy fitting in, so busy being liked, so busy getting the approval of the people around them, that they do not realize they have stopped living their own life and started performing someone else's idea of a life. Watch what happens when a truly original idea enters a crowd. A person stands up and says, I think we should go this way. And immediately the crowd turns. Who said that? Why do you think you are different? Why can you not just do it like everyone else? Stay in line. Know your place. Do not cause trouble. And if the person with the original idea is not deeply rooted in their own identity, they will sit down. They will be quiet. They will swallow the vision. And they will carry that swallowed vision inside them for the rest of their lives, this uncomfortable lump of something that was supposed to be expressed but never got the chance. A leader must be willing to be alone. A leader must be willing to be alone. This is not a comfortable truth. This is not the kind of thing that fits nicely on a motivational poster. Being alone is hard. Being misunderstood is hard. Standing in a room full of people who are all pointing in one direction while you are pointing in a different direction, that takes a strength that goes beyond what most people want to develop. Most people will choose comfort over calling every single time. Most people will choose belonging over purpose because belonging feels good right now, and purpose often asks for sacrifice right now for results that come much later. But listen to this. Every great movement in human history was started by one person who was willing to be alone with an idea before the world was ready for it. Every invention that changed the way people live was conceived in the mind of someone who was told it was impossible. Every discovery that pushed human understanding forward came from a person who was willing to stand against the consensus and say, I believe something different. And almost always, that person stood alone first. Stood alone in the ridicule, stood alone in the mockery, stood alone in the confusion, before the world eventually caught up and said, you are right all along. The crowd does not produce leaders. The crowd consumes them. The crowd takes the energy of original thinkers and uses it to sustain the average thinking of the majority. This is why a leader must protect the space of solitude, not isolation. There's a difference. Isolation is hiding from people out of fear. Solitude is choosing to be alone with your purpose because you understand that the crowd cannot take you where you are meant to go. Think of any mountain you have ever seen. The summit is always empty. The base is always crowded. There are hundreds of people at the bottom of every mountain, camping, talking, settling in, building little towns of comfort. And there are very few people at the top. Not because the top is impossible to reach, but because the climb requires something that most people are not willing to pay. It requires leaving the crowd behind. It requires moving at a pace the crowd cannot maintain. It requires a vision that is clear enough to keep you moving even when the path gets dark and cold and steep and you cannot see anyone else around you. Now, following is not always wrong. This must be said with honesty. There is a time and a season for receiving instruction, for learning under authority, for submitting to wisdom that is greater than your own current understanding. Even the greatest leaders in history went through seasons of learning. But there is a difference between following someone who is taking you somewhere you are meant to go and following a crowd that is simply moving, because movement gives the illusion of purpose. One is growth, the other is drift. The tragedy of the follower is not that they follow. The tragedy is that they follow forever. They never arrive at the moment of decision where they say, the lessons are learned, the preparation is complete. Now it is time to step into my own lane and lead from the territory that belongs to me. They keep waiting. They keep looking to the side to see what others are doing. They keep calibrating their speed and direction to match the crowd. And year after year, the unique gift inside them goes unused. The unique territory inside them goes unclaimed. And the world is robbed of something it needed. There are people in the world right now who needed what you carry. Not what the person next to you carries. Not what the most popular voice in your field carries. What you carry. Your specific experience, your specific perspective, your specific way of understanding the world and communicating what you see, that is irreplaceable. There is no one else in all of human history, past, present, or future, who carries exactly what you carry. And if you spend your life following the crowd, that irreplaceable thing dies with you. And the people who needed it never receive it. And they suffer for the lack of it. And they may not even know why they are suffering, because they never knew that you existed, because you chose the comfort of the crowd over the courage of the call. The leader must be comfortable with being misunderstood. Say it to yourself. Be comfortable with being misunderstood. Not arrogant, not stubborn, not unwilling to learn or receive correction, but deeply settled in the bones, comfortable with the fact that people who see further than those around them will always be somewhat misunderstood by those around them. The person who sees 10 years ahead will be called impractical by the person who only sees 10 days ahead. The person who thinks on a global scale will be called unrealistic by the person who only thinks on a local scale. The person who believes that something has never been done before is no reason not to do it will be called a fool by the person who uses tradition as the ceiling of possibility. And here is the most important thing to understand about being misunderstood. Being misunderstood does not mean being wrong. Being misunderstood simply means being ahead. And being ahead is uncomfortable. But it is the only place from which a leader can actually lead. You cannot lead from the middle of the crowd. You can only lead from the front. And the front is, by definition, the place where you have gone further than everyone else, which means you were there long before they caught up. Now, there is a price for leaving the crowd. And that price must be counted honestly. Because a leader does not build on illusions. The price is this. When you stop needing the crowd's approval to know who you are, some people will feel rejected by that freedom. When you stop adjusting your speed to match the slowest person in the room, some people will feel left behind. When you start making decisions based on vision instead of consensus, some people will feel disrespected, and they will express those feelings, sometimes loudly, sometimes through gossip, sometimes through withdrawal of support, sometimes through outright opposition. And the leader must be able to absorb that discomfort without losing their footing. This is why identity is everything. This is why knowing who you are at a level that goes deeper than what people say about you or what your circumstances suggest about you is the foundation of everything else. If your sense of self is built on the opinions of others, then every time opinions shift, you shift. And a leader who shifts with every opinion is not a leader. That is a weather vane, spinning with the wind, pointing wherever the pressure goes, never truly pointing anywhere with conviction. A leader points even when the wind is blowing the other way. A leader points even when nobody else can see what the leader sees. A leader holds the direction steady while everything around them is uncertain, because the leader has done the internal work of knowing, deeply knowing what the direction is and why. So the first step away from the tragedy of the follower is this. Stop measuring your worth by the number of people who agree with you. Start measuring your direction by the clarity of the vision that was placed inside you. Those are two completely different measurement systems, and only one of them will take you somewhere worth going. Now, the second great truth that must be understood is this. Every human being was given a territory. Every human being was given a territory. The law of territory. Not everyone was born to lead in the same space. This is a misunderstanding that causes great confusion and unnecessary comparison. When people think of leadership, they think of presidents and CEOs and generals and famous pastors. And so those who are not in those spaces assume that leadership is not for them. They look at the visible leaders, the ones in the large halls with the large cameras and the large audiences, and they think that is not my world. And so they conclude that leadership is not their calling. But this conclusion is built on a false picture of what leadership is and where it lives. Leadership does not only live in halls of government. Leadership does not only live in boardrooms and stadiums and television screens. Leadership lives in every domain of human life. It lives in the kitchen where a mother is shaping the character of the next generation. It lives in the classroom where a teacher is forming the thinking of young minds. It lives in the laboratory where a scientist is asking the questions that will advance human understanding. It lives in the workshop where a craftsman is producing things with a standard of excellence that sets the bar for everyone who comes after. Every human being was given a domain, a kingdom, a territory. And the size of the kingdom is not the measure of the king. The faithfulness of the king to that kingdom, the depth of understanding the king brings to that kingdom, the standard of excellence the king holds within that kingdom, that is the measure. So the question is not, am I a leader? The question is, what is my territory? What is the specific domain that was given to you before you arrived here? What is the space that when you enter it, you feel a strange combination of deep responsibility and natural power? What is the area where your thinking goes deeper automatically, where your questions are sharper, where your curiosity never runs dry, where time disappears because the engagement is so complete. That feeling, that experience is the signpost. That is the territory announcing itself to the person who was born to rule it. And here is something remarkable. Everyone who has ever done truly great work in any field says the same thing in different words. They say, it felt like I was born to do this. It felt like this was what I was made for. Even the work was not always easy. Even the failures were painful. But there was never a question about whether this was the right territory. That certainty is not arrogance. That certainty is alignment. When a person is operating in their true territory, there is an alignment between their inner nature and their outer activity that produces a kind of certainty that no amount of external difficulty can shake. And that certainty is one of the clearest signs that a person has found their domain. But how does a person find their territory? This is the practical question. And the answer requires honesty, because most people are living in the wrong territory. Most people chose their territory based on what was available, what was safe, what paid the most, what their parents recommended, what their culture approved of, and these are understandable reasons. Nobody should be mocked for being practical. But a territory chosen by practicality alone, without consulting the deep inner knowing of who you truly are, is a territory that will never produce the full measure of what you were built to produce. Finding a territory begins with a specific kind of listening. Not listening to the market, not listening to your bank account, not listening to your family's expectations. Listening to the thing inside you that has been trying to speak for years, that has been shouted down by practicality and fear and the noise of other people's opinions. There is something in you that knows. It has always known. The question is whether you have been quiet enough and brave enough to hear it. Here are some questions that help a person locate their territory. First, what do you do where time disappears? Not entertainment, not distraction, not the things you do to escape from your real life, but the things you do where you look up and hours have passed and you are not tired, you are energized because the activity itself fed you rather than depleted you. That kind of engagement is a map. Follow it. Second, what problems make you angry? Not the things that annoy you as a matter of personal inconvenience. The things that make you angry at a deeper level, a moral level, a this should not be this way level. The things you look at and think someone should fix this, someone should address this, someone should say something about this. And then there is that whisper, often very quiet, very easy to dismiss. Maybe that someone is you. The problems that make you angry at the deepest level are often signposts pointing directly at your territory. Because leaders are not drawn to problems randomly. Leaders are drawn to the problems that belong to their territory. Third, what knowledge do you absorb without effort? When you pick up a book in a certain field, do you read the way most people read, forcing yourself through pages, checking how many pages are left, eager to be done? Or do you read the way a starving person eats, consuming the information hungrily, going from one book to the next, not because you were assigned to, but because you cannot get enough? The subjects where learning feels like eating and not like medicine, those subjects are pointing to your territory. Fourth, what do people come to you for without being asked? Because before you knew your territory officially, your territory was already showing up in your relationships. People were already sensing something in you. They were already bringing certain problems to you. They were already asking you certain kinds of questions. They were not doing this consciously. They were doing it because they could feel at some intuitive level that you carried something for that specific area. Pay attention to what people ask of you. Sometimes the world sees your territory before you do. Now, once a person finds their territory, the next step is not to run into it without preparation. The next step is to understand that a territory must be studied, served, and then ruled. There is a sequence. No king walks into a kingdom and begins ruling without first understanding the kingdom. The land must be walked, the people must be known, the problems must be understood in their full depth. The history of the territory must be respected. And then, out of that deep knowing, the leader can begin to bring order, vision, and advancement. This is why the years that look like wasted years are often the most important years. The years of obscurity, the years of learning in the background, the years of serving in roles that did not seem worthy of the gift. Those years are not wasted. Those years are the season of kingdom study. Those years are where the future leader develops the knowledge of the territory that will later make their leadership both wise and effective. There is a great danger for gifted people in the age of instant information and instant recognition. The danger is that they will try to jump from diamond in the mud directly to crowned king, skipping the long and necessary season of preparation. And what happens to a king who has not yet learned his kingdom is a tragedy of a different kind. Not the tragedy of the follower who never steps into leadership at all, but the tragedy of a leader who steps into leadership too soon and causes damage, both to themselves and to the people who were looking to them for wisdom they had not yet developed. Preparation is not delay. Preparation is not the enemy of your destiny. Preparation is the road that leads to your destiny. And a wise leader respects the road even when it is long, even when others seem to be arriving faster, even when the waiting is uncomfortable and the obscurity is humbling. The road is the road. And every step on the road is building something that cannot be built any other way. So the law of territory says this: you were given a specific domain before you arrived in this world. That domain is yours. It is not in competition with anyone else's domain. It is not threatened by the success of others in their domains. It is uniquely yours, calling you by name, waiting for you to show up with the fullness of your preparation and the clarity of your identity and the courage of your conviction and say, this is my territory. And today, the work begins in earnest. When you step into your true territory, something supernatural happens. Problems that stumped everyone else become clear to you. Solutions that nobody else could see appear naturally in your thinking. The energy that was being drained by living in the wrong space is suddenly available because you are no longer working against your own nature. You are working with it. And working with your nature is effortless in the deepest sense, not that it requires no effort, but that the effort flows rather than grinds. The work is hard, but the direction is clear. The price is real, but the purpose makes the price worthwhile. This is what the diamond looked like after the rain washed the mud away and the sun hit its surface. Not something new. The same substance that was always there, but now visible, now operating in its true nature, now shining with the light it was designed to carry. The mud is washing off, the light is coming, the territory is waiting, and the king inside you, the leader that was placed in you before you were placed in this world, is beginning to remember, beginning to stand up straight, beginning to look out at the horizon with eyes that are not asking for permission, but are simply seeing clearly for the first time what was always there to be seen. This is only the beginning. The question now is not whether you have found the territory. Many people find the territory. Many people have that moment of recognition where they feel the alignment, where they hear the call clearly, where they know without a shadow of a doubt what they were built for. The question is, what happens next? Because finding the territory is not the same as ruling it. And this is where many gifted people stop. They find the territory, but they do not develop the character to sustain the responsibility that comes with ruling it. And a leader without character is not a leader. That is a disaster, waiting to announce itself. The king's character. There is a law that most people do not want to hear because it requires something deeply personal, deeply private, and deeply uncomfortable. The law is this: you can only lead others as far as you have led yourself. Read that again. You can only lead others as far as you have led yourself. Whatever distance you have not yet traveled in your own interior world, in your own mind, in your own habits, in your own discipline, that distance will show up as a ceiling in your leadership. The gap in yourself becomes the gap in your results. And no amount of talent, no amount of charisma, No amount of good intention can fill a character gap. Only character can fill a character gap. The first and most important battle a leader ever fights is not in the marketplace. It is not in the boardroom. It is not in the public arena. The first and most important battle a leader ever fights is in the bedroom at 5 in the morning when the alarm goes off and the pillow is comfortable and there is no one watching that battle, the private battle. The battle between the person you are and the person you have decided to become. And every morning that battle is won or lost. And the outcome of that battle, repeated over days and weeks and months and years, produces either a king or a fraud. A leader who rules themselves and can therefore rule others, or a person who performs leadership publicly while privately surrendering to every weakness that was never confronted and never conquered. Self-discipline is the throne of the king. Self-discipline is the throne of the king. Without it, there is no stable place from which to rule. A king who cannot control his own appetite cannot control a kingdom. A king who cannot govern his own tongue cannot govern a people. A king who cannot order his own time cannot bring order to a territory. The outer world of a leader is always, without exception, a reflection of the inner world. The discipline you refuse to apply to yourself will become the disorder you experience in everything you try to build. Now, self-discipline is widely misunderstood. Most people hear the word and think restriction. They think suffering. They think about the things they have to give up, the pleasures they have to deny, the freedom they have to surrender. And because they see discipline as the enemy of enjoyment, they resist it. They make peace with their inconsistencies. They excuse their habits. They tell themselves that they will start being more disciplined when conditions are better, when they have more support, when they have more resources, when life is less complicated. And conditions never get better because conditions are built by discipline, and discipline was waiting on better conditions. And so nothing ever gets built. But here is what self-discipline actually is. Self-discipline is the highest form of self-respect. Say that again. Self-discipline is the highest form of self-respect. When you decide that your future matters more than your present comfort, that is respect. That is treating your own life as something valuable enough to invest in. That is agreeing with the vision that was placed inside you and saying, this vision deserves a vessel that is worthy of carrying it. And so the life of the vessel must be organized around the requirements of the vision, not around the preferences of the moment. A king who understood this built daily routines that honored the responsibility of the throne before anyone else was awake. Not because someone required it, not because someone was watching, but because the king understood that the quality of the private hours determines the quality of the public hours. What you do when nobody sees you is what you truly are. And what you truly are is what your leadership will ultimately become. Character is not built in the dramatic moments. Character is not built in the great crises, in the moments of decision that everyone sees and everyone remembers. Character is built in the small moments, the ordinary Tuesday, the regular morning, the moment when nothing important seems to be happening and the choice between discipline and convenience seems too small to matter. Those moments are not small. Those moments are where the foundation is laid. And foundations do not look impressive while they are being built. They look like digging. They look like dirt and effort and slowness and no visible results. But when the storm comes, and the storm always comes, the building that stands is the building whose foundation was built in the unimpressive, ordinary moments that nobody was watching. There are 3 specific areas where a leader must exercise ruthless self-governance. The first is time. Time is the currency of destiny. Every human being on this earth receives the same 24 hours in a day. The president of a nation and the person who has never led anything receive the same 24 hours. What separates them is not the time itself, but what is done with the time. A leader who does not govern their time with intention and precision is a leader who is letting their destiny leak out of a broken container. Every hour given to distraction is an hour taken from purpose. Every hour consumed by the urgent but unimportant is an hour stolen from the significant and eternal. The second area is thought. The interior life of a leader is the source of everything the leader produces in the exterior world. What a leader thinks about consistently, what a leader meditates on, what a leader allows to occupy the primary real estate of their mind, this determines the direction and quality of everything that follows. A leader who fills the mind with fear thinks in the language of retreat. A leader who fills the mind with comparison thinks in the language of competition and jealousy. But a leader who fills the mind with vision, with possibility, with the deep study of their territory and the requirements of their calling, that leader thinks in the language of creation. And creators build, creators advance. Creators leave the world different from how they found it. The third area is relationships. A leader must be wise about who has access to their inner life. Not cold, not suspicious, not disconnected from humanity, but wise, because the people who are closest to a leader have the greatest power to shape the leader's thinking, to either reinforce the vision or slowly erode it, to either call out the king or to make the king feel foolish for thinking like one. A leader must surround themselves with people who are going somewhere, people who respect the calling, even when they do not fully understand it, people who challenge the leader to be better rather than comfortable. And the leader must have the courage to increase the distance between themselves and the people who, no matter how beloved, are consistently pulling the leader back toward the mud. Character is the only protection a leader has when the territory expands and the pressure increases. Because pressure does not create character. Pressure reveals character. What was already there comes out under pressure. And if what was already there was not built through years of private discipline and honest self-examination, then when the pressure comes and the world is watching, what comes out will not be worthy of the position. And the fall from a high position is always harder than the fall from a low one. So the king must build the character before the kingdom expands. The king must do the work on the inside before the work on the outside can be trusted to last. And this is not slow work. This is the most important work. This is the work that makes all other work meaningful. This is the foundation that makes the building possible. The power of vision. Now, once a leader has found the territory and is building the character required to sustain the responsibility of ruling it, the next thing that must be developed is the most powerful tool a leader possesses. That tool is vision. And vision is not a dream. Vision is not a wish. Vision is not a vague sense that things should be better than they are. Vision is a precise, detailed, living picture of a future that does not yet exist in the physical world, but is completely real in the mind of the leader who carries it. A king sees the end from the beginning. A king sees the end from the beginning. This is one of the most extraordinary abilities that separates true leaders from everyone else. While the crowd is reacting to the present, the leader is already living in the future. While everyone else is asking what is happening right now, the leader is asking, what is this leading to? And then beyond that, what should it be leading to? And then beyond even that, how does the leader bring the present into alignment with the preferred future? Vision is not passive. Vision is not sitting quietly and imagining beautiful things. Vision is an active, disciplined practice of constructing a mental picture of what should be and then organizing every decision, every resource, every relationship, every hour of the day around the movement toward that picture. Here is how vision is built. It begins with a problem, not a personal problem necessarily, though it can be, but a problem in the territory, a gap between what is and what should be, a need that is going unmet, a question that is going unanswered, a standard that is not being reached. The leader looks at that gap and does not simply feel frustrated by it the way most people feel frustrated. The leader looks at that gap and sees an assignment, sees a responsibility, sees the specific problem that their territory was designed to solve. Then the leader does something that most people never do. The leader sits with the future, not with the present constraints, not with the current obstacles, not with the voices of everyone who's already tried and failed. The leader sets all of that to the side and asks a single powerful question. If everything that needed to be in place were in place, what would this look like? If resources were not a limitation, if opposition were not a factor, if time were not an obstacle, what is the full picture of what this territory should look like when it is functioning at its highest possible level? And then the leader paints that picture in great detail, not as a vague aspiration, but as a specific destination. What does it look like? What does it feel like? What is different about the people who have been served by this vision? What problems have been solved? What standard has been raised? What does the territory look like when it is fully expressed? This is the mental picture. This is the vision. And once it is clearly painted, it becomes the most powerful navigational tool a leader has. Because now every decision can be measured against a single question. Does this move toward the picture or away from it? Vision also gives a leader the ability to endure. And endurance is not a small thing. Endurance is perhaps the most underrated quality in leadership because most people focus on starting and very few people focus on finishing. Many people begin with great energy and genuine commitment, but when the obstacles come, when the resources dry up, when the critics grow louder, when the timeline stretches longer than expected, most people stop. Not because the vision was wrong, not because they lacked ability, but because the picture in their mind was not clear enough, not detailed enough, not real enough to sustain the commitment through the painful middle of the journey. The painful middle is where most great things die. Not in the beginning, when excitement is high and support is available and the newness of the thing carries people forward. And not at the end, because people who get close enough to the end can usually see it clearly enough to push through. It is the middle that destroys most visions. The long, unglamorous, uncertain stretch where the beginning is already far behind and the end is not yet visible. And every day requires a choice to keep going based on nothing but the picture in the mind and the conviction in the heart that the picture is real and the destination is worth the distance. A leader with a clear vision can survive the middle because the leader is not navigating by what can be seen with the physical eye. The leader is navigating by what can be seen with the eye of vision. And the eye of vision does not need external confirmation to keep seeing. It sees because the picture has been built with enough detail and enough conviction that it functions as its own source of light in the dark stretches of the journey. Another powerful function of vision is that it attracts. Vision is magnetic. When a person knows exactly where they are going and communicates that destination with clarity and conviction, something happens in the people around them. Something in the human spirit responds to clear direction. People who have been drifting, people who have been wandering, people who have been waiting for something worth committing to, they are drawn to a leader who knows where the journey ends. Not because the journey is easy, not because the leader promises no difficulty, but because the certainty of the destination provides something that most people are desperately lacking in their lives, a reason to move with purpose. So build the vision, build it in detail, write it down, speak it out loud, revisit it daily. Let it be the first thing the mind reaches for in the morning and the last thing the mind rests on at night. Let it become more real than the obstacles. Let it become more powerful than the opinions. Let it become the organizing principle of every choice, every investment, every conversation, every season of preparation. Because a leader without vision is not a leader. A leader without vision is simply a person with a title walking in circles while the territory waits, serving your way to the top. Now, there is a final principle that must be laid down before the great conclusion of this message. And it is the principle that turns everything the world thinks about power upside down. The world says that to lead is to be served. that the higher you rise, the more you receive. That power is about what comes to you. That the top of the mountain is the place where you finally stop giving and start receiving. But this is one of the greatest lies ever told about leadership. And it is a lie that has produced some of the most destructive leaders in human history. Leaders who climb to the top to take rather than to give. Leaders who use the territory for personal gain rather than for the advancement of the people and purposes the territory was designed to serve. And without exception, every leader who has ever led for personal gain has eventually been destroyed by the very power they sought to use for themselves. True leadership is service. True leadership is service. Not weakness, not servility, not doing whatever people ask simply to be liked, but the deep, purposeful, costly service of giving your greatest gift to the people who need it most. This is what a true leader does. A true leader looks at the territory and says, what do these people need? What does this space require? What is the highest contribution that can be made here? And then the leader pays whatever price is required to make that contribution. Think about the greatest leaders in any field. The ones who are remembered not just during their lifetime, but long after it. The ones whose names are spoken with reverence decades and centuries after they have left. What is the common thread? It is not that they accumulated the most. It is not that they held on to power the longest. It is that they gave the most. They poured themselves into their territory with such completeness, with such generosity, with such willingness to spend their best years and their best energy and their deepest resources on something beyond themselves, that the territory was permanently changed by their presence. That is the standard of true leadership. Not what you accumulate, what you contribute. Not what you take, what you leave behind. And here is the paradox that the world cannot seem to understand, no matter how many times it is demonstrated. The leaders who give the most receive the most. Not as a transaction, not as a formula they apply strategically, but as a natural consequence of the law that governs all territory. When a king takes care of the kingdom takes care of the king. When a leader serves the territory with excellence and integrity and genuine love for the work and the people, the territory responds. Resources come, influence grows, opportunities appear. Support arrives from directions that were never anticipated, because the territory knows its true king, and the territory honors the one who truly honors it. This is why serving is not a stop on the way to the top. Serving is the way to the top. Not strategic serving, not performing service as a method of gaining something, but genuine, costly, joyful service that comes from a place of understanding that the gift was not given to the leader for the leader's benefit. The gift was given to the leader to be given to the world. And when a leader understands this, everything changes. The ego stops competing with the calling. The desire for recognition stops fighting with the desire to contribute. And the leader is finally free to do the work at the level it deserves to be done, because the work is no longer about the leader at all. It is about the territory. It is about the people. It is about the contribution. It is about leaving the space better than it was found. Service also builds the trust that leadership requires to be sustained. Because people can feel the difference between a leader who is serving them and a leader who is using them. The feeling is very clear, even when the words are the same. A leader who serves speaks, and people feel cared for. A leader who uses speaks, and people feel like instruments. And instruments eventually rebel. Instruments eventually refuse to be played. But people who are genuinely served, people who feel that the leader is spending their gift on their behalf, those people become the most loyal, most committed, most powerful force a leader can ever have behind them. So serve. Serve greatly. Serve with everything that was placed inside you. Serve the territory with the full depth of the gift. Serve the people with the full weight of the vision. Serve the calling with the full commitment of a life organized around purpose rather than comfort. And watch what happens. Watch how the territory responds. Watch how the people rise. Watch how the leader who gave everything away ends up with more than they ever could have taken by force. Now it is time for the great conclusion. And this conclusion is not a summary. It is a challenge, a direct, personal, serious challenge to the person listening right now. Stop asking for a job. Start creating a world. Stop asking for a job. Start creating a world. These are not just inspiring words. This is a complete revolution in the way a person understands their relationship to their own life and to the world around them. And it is the most important shift in thinking that a leader must ever make. Because as long as a person is asking for a job, they are operating from a follower mindset. They are saying someone else created something, and now here is what they are willing to pay to borrow my time and my skills to help maintain what they built. And that arrangement may be necessary for a season, but it cannot be the destination for a person who carries a kingdom inside them. Think about what a job actually is. A job is someone else's vision expressed through your effort. Someone else saw a need. Someone else had the courage to step into the territory. Someone else built the structure, took the risk, organized the resources, and then created a role for you to play inside the world they built. And there is nothing wrong with that role. Roles are necessary. Teams are necessary. Organizations need people who are willing to show up and contribute their skill to a larger structure. But the question a leader must eventually answer is this: am I called to build someone else's vision for the rest of my life? Or is there a world inside me that I am responsible for building? Because the world needs builders. The world does not need more people sitting in waiting rooms hoping to be selected. The world needs people who have found their territory and stepped into it with the full force of their preparation and their character and their vision, and began to build something that the world did not have before they arrived. Every company that exists today was once only an idea in someone's mind. Every institution that serves millions of people was once a single person's conviction that something needed to exist that did not yet exist. Every movement that changed the course of history was once a voice in the wilderness. One person standing in an empty field, speaking a truth that had not yet been heard, building a world that had not yet been seen. The only difference between that person and the person listening right now is a decision. A single decision to stop waiting and start building. Stop waiting for permission. Stop waiting for permission. The territory does not require a permission slip. The gift inside you was not placed there on a conditional basis. There was no fine print that said this gift will only be activated once the right opportunity presents itself. Once the right person recognizes you. Once the right season arrives. The gift is active right now. The territory is open right now. The world that needs to be built is waiting right now. The only thing standing between the current reality and the world that should exist is the decision to stop asking and start creating. Now, creating does not always mean starting a company. Creating does not always mean launching a movement. Creating means showing up to your territory with a builder's mentality rather than a passenger's mentality. A passenger sits in the seat and waits to be taken somewhere. A builder looks at the space and says, what can be made here? What can be organized here? What standard can be raised here? What problem can be solved here? What does this space become when it is touched by someone who understands both the territory and the responsibility that comes with it? A person can be a builder in a kitchen, creating a home environment that produces children who change the world. A person can be a builder in a classroom, creating an educational experience that ignites a love of learning in young minds that burns for the rest of their lives. A person can be a builder in a hospital ward, bringing a standard of care and compassion that transforms the experience of sick and frightened people. A person can be a builder in a small shop, producing work with a quality and an intention that sets a standard for everything around it. Building is not about scale. Building is about intention. Building is about the decision to engage with your territory as someone who is responsible for it rather than simply present in it. But for many people listening right now, the call is larger. The call is to actually step out and create something that does not yet exist. To bring that world that lives so clearly in the vision into physical reality. And if that is the call, then the word from this moment forward is courage. Courage. Courage to begin before you are completely ready, because you will never be completely ready. Courage to start small, because everything great started small, and smallness is not shame. Courage to be misunderstood in the early seasons, because the early seasons are always the ones where the vision is clearest to the builder and least clear to everyone watching. Courage to keep going through the painful middle, because the middle is where most people stop, and the leader who does not stop will eventually arrive at the destination that the vision always promised. The diamond in the mud never needed to become something new. The diamond only needed to be in the right position for the rain of truth and the light of courage to do their work. And the work was not complicated. The rain fell, the light shone, and the diamond shone back. That is all. That is the whole story. The glory was always there. The nature was always there. The capacity to shine was always there. What was needed was simply the removal of the mud and the willingness to stand in the light without flinching, without hiding, without apologizing for what the light revealed. That is you. Right now, at this moment, with everything that has been said in this message, working its way into the deeper layers of who you are and who you have always been, that is you. The diamond is not buried anymore. The mud is washing off. The light is reaching the surface. And the question is only this: will you let it shine? Will you stop covering yourself back up with the mud of doubt and the mud of other people's small opinions of your large life? Will you stand in the territory that was given to you and say, with the full weight of everything that lives inside you, this is my space, this is my assignment, this is my responsibility, and the time for holding back is over? The world does not need another person who almost stepped into their greatness. The world does not need another diamond that chose to stay in the mud because the mud was familiar. The world needs you fully. It needs the version of you that stopped asking for permission and started exercising authority. The version of you that stopped comparing the territory to someone else's territory and started building in the territory that was given exclusively to you. The version of you that stopped following the crowd to their mediocre destination and started walking the singular road that only you can walk, toward the world that only you can build. The king is awake. The king is awake. The territory is calling. The vision is clear. The character is being built. The gift is ready to be served. And the world that was always waiting on the other side of your courage is about to receive what was meant to arrive through you from the very beginning. Go build the world. It was always yours to build.